Welcome, everybody. Today is Thursday. What's the date?
May 28th.
May 28th. And we are here for our midweek devotional time looking at the book of James. Ben, you have some announcements for us as we get started.
We just want to remind everyone of the coffee clutch we hold by Zoom on Mondays at 10. And you can get the link to that in your weekly update, your email weekly update that you receive from the church. A week from Sunday, we'll be doing communion and inspiration. It is a drive-through communion. We'll make sure to keep our social distance, the 6 feet away, but you'll drive through, taking a left from West Main Street onto Mistletoe, the other side of the property of the church. It's something different and something a way for us to see one another. Check your email for 2 meetings coming up. There is a governing board meeting and a board of trustees meeting coming up. The governing board will be just looking at the processes that we need to take to open up the church for worship, because inevitably that will be coming, and we should hear more from the bishop in the next week of that date. For this Sunday, we have a special treat. Jeff Stanley, our guitarist, is going to be coming into the sanctuary and playing for us. He'll be playing an instrumental, so we look forward to that. This coming Sunday is a Sunday of Pentecost, and we're just trying to make it a little special. And we continue our study on the book of James this afternoon, and, well, we'll take a moment to center, and then we'll begin.
All right.
Take a moment to close your eyes or look at something that brings you calm, maybe something outside your window or in your backyard. Feel the breeze. Take a moment and take in a deep breath, letting your diaphragm rise, taking that breath deep within, breathing in the goodness of God and creation. And then releasing that air, exhaling slowly to release any anxiety you might be feeling, any worry. Once again, breathe in the patience of God. Relax your body. Those areas where you feel tension, just try to find some ease and slowly exhale. One more time. Breathe in through your nose and then exhale, and find your center. And so we continue to look at the book of James.
Yes. So Ben, you mentioned on Tuesday that one of the issues that Martin Luther and people in church history have had with the book of James is the lack of Jesus. They don't talk, like James isn't talking about Jesus enough. But there are a couple of other reasons I think that will come to the fore as we focus more on the message of James and what he has to say and dig a little deeper. One that I think that Luther had an issue with was he saw a lot of good moral instruction here, but not much in the way of grace. And Luther was all about grace. The just shall live by faith. And he worried that James lent itself to a kind of works righteousness. Our own John Wesley, on the other hand, in his notes on the book of James, says in his rather dry way, "Herein the apostle reproves the antinomian spirit, which had by that time infected many who had preserved the glorious doctrine of justification by faith into an occasion of licentiousness."
Licentiousness.
Yeah.
Big word.
Big word. Meaning that Wesley saw a danger also that of an anything goes approach to grace, where if you believe, you don't need to be perfected into anything. You just can do whatever you want. But Wesley, of course, had place for perfection and sanctification. And we find most of the words in James actually in the rest of the New Testament, Jesus says kind of the same things. Paul says kind of the same things. So there is this focus on morality elsewhere. You can't just have one, right? Mm-hmm. Grace and not any way to live however you want, or live however you want and we have no grace, or live righteously and we have no grace. So I mean, it's that tension, and I think James and oh hey, I'm getting a call. All right, sorry about that. I guess I did turn my ringer off. But what do you think, Ben?
I think that the pendulum swings in the history of the Christian church, where grace sometimes becomes cheap, as Dietrich Bonhoeffer would say, and it doesn't necessarily call us to task because we are doers of the word.
Right.
And then we can go to the other extreme where, you had before in the time of Martin Luther, there really was little grace and everything was about works and paying down the money to get that forgiveness. So there's a balance to be found in all this. I think you need the book of James sometimes to offer that counterbalance to a life of grace that asks little of us, because as Bonhoeffer said, it asks the man of his life.
Yeah. Right. Well, and you use the phrase doer of the word, which of course the end
is
of
from James.
End of James, and if we get that far today, then we will discuss that part. But the other thing that I think that people have in the tradition struggled with James, especially in days when the church was more established, is that there is a preferential treatment of the poor, and it really seems to be written to people that are not, white middle class American educated folks like ourselves, but their social location is different. I mean, we start with the church scattered. We talk about people in trials. And as we get into this, our first section that where we left off last time, verse 9 and 10, let the believer who is lowly boast in being raised up, and the rich in being brought low, because the rich will disappear like a flower of the field, for the sun rises with its scorching heat and withers the field. Its flowers fall and its beauty perishes. In the same way with the rich, in the midst of busy life, they will wither away.
And that actually echoes much of Jesus' teaching.
Sure.
We, middle class, upper middle class Americans are very uncomfortable with that part of the New Testament, in the Gospels and in some of these letters, but there's not a whole lot good to be said about being very wealthy. You're supposed to, we're called to give that away.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking in terms of the Magnificat and that reversal that Mary sings about in Luke, or John
reversal of fortune,
John the Baptist, and the valleys raised up, the mountains brought low.
If you have two coats, give away one.
I wonder sometimes what James would think of our political landscape right now, where often the agenda set by both sides of the political aisles are underwritten by billionaires. Mm-hmm. I mean, we have on the right, we have Trump, our billionaire president, and the Koch brothers. On the left, we have George Soros and Bill Gates.
Right.
But the theme of James' letter doesn't have a peripheral option for the rich.
No.
They're brought low, and they're reminded that they're ephemeral, they're fleeting.
But at times, the church has become a preferential option for the wealthy. Yeah.
I do find his metaphor here is because the fleetingness of the rich, they're the ones described as will wither away in the scorching heat of the sun, but it only says it to the rich.
Yeah. That's a comeuppance, huh?
It is, yeah. So I want to look at the next chunk of it, but let me look at it in a big chunk, because I think this is the other side of it, of like what we do, the moral practice. But blessed is anyone who endures temptation, such as the one who stood the test and will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love him. No one, when tempted, should say, is tempted by God, for God cannot be tempted by evil, or himself tempts no one. But one is tempted by one's own desire, being lured and enticed by it. then when the desire is conceived, it gives birth to sin, and that sin, when it's fully grown, gives birth to death.
I have had many of those experiences. Last time I bought a bicycle, I was being lured and tempted to be buying a bicycle that was several $1,000s, and I'm not a several $1,000 biker rider, but boy, it was a temptation.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, in that temptation, I think we have a hard time talking about it today. I mean, I know I, as someone who preaches, and you as somebody who preaches, we don't often focus there. In fact, I would say most of the time we talk about temptation in our culture right now, we are talking about dessert. We are talking about a chocolate-shaped void in the heart
of your soul.
Of your soul, yes. But here, like as we unfold this, James is talking about controlling our anger and our speech, about ridding ourselves of wickedness and learning meekness. I mean, it's pretty different than what we think. It's not just being holier than thou kind of thing, but like learning a way of life that just isn't drawn different directions, but is actually caring for those around you. And
it's in many ways economic.
Yeah.
The temptation.
Yeah.
And I also think that within the New Testament, including James, that much of this can't be carried out alone. It has to. You need to be part of a community.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing in this section that I really love, and is right in the middle of this. He's talking about behavior and how you behave, and he says every generous act of giving, which is a perfect gift, is from above, coming down from the Father of light, and with whom there's no variation or shadow of turning or change. And it could be like you're talking about how to be morally upright. It would be so easy at this point to just paint God as a moral taskmaster. So how about this, Martin Luther? There's grace right here. There is grace, is that we've been given this gift, which James says is the word of truth, and we've become the first fruit of his creatures, that there is a transformation that happens in us that allows us to be different. When it talks at the end, as we mentioned before, about being doers and not mere hearers, this is so important and very, very Methodist, because we care more about what you do than what you believe as Methodists.
Yes.
In one sense. But for those of us who are learners and like to learn, it is so easy to abstract the faith into what you think and what you believe and doctrine. And James reminds us that has to be joined with action.
It makes me recall the means of grace that John Wesley talked about. And some of the means of grace were actually the doing opened ourselves, our hearts and lives up to the grace. So if you visit the prisoner, feed the hungry, attend to the sick, that opens you up to God's grace, rather than sitting in a chair and just waiting for it to show up for you.
Yeah. Now I need to get to this because this is the last verse in here, but it's also my favorite verse in the whole Bible.
Okay.
Religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this: to care for the orphans and the widows in distress, and to keep yourselves unstained by the world.
That's beautiful.
It is. And this draws together the whole theme of what he's saying here is like, you want to prove that what you believe is actually true, then we will see it by the way that you care for the vulnerable, those that are orphaned or cast aside, those who are kicked out and rejected, those who are widowed or grieving and alone. The way that you care for those, that shows that what you believe is true. And when it talks about keeping yourself unstained by the world, I don't think they're talking about just being, upright in your morality, whatever that means, so much as not being conformed to the world systems. So, I mean, this week we heard about the George Floyd, who was killed in
in Minneapolis.
Minneapolis, Minnesota. Right. And it's interesting, there's been riots about that. And whenever there are riots, people are more concerned about the property destruction than the fact that somebody was killed. Yeah. And to me, that would be being conformed to the world of like, well, people are just acting out in a way. And they're like, oh no, well, how are we caring for those who are vulnerable, those who are ground up by the system? Being conformed by the world.
Yeah, I've often said, no, I've not had this happen, that if somebody wants my wallet isn't as valuable as their life, which is why I would never shoot someone, because I'd rather have them have my wallet.
Can I have your wallet?
Than have their life. Because, that life is sacred. My wallet's my wallet.
Yeah.
And their life is sacred even though they may be trying to rob me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that kind of being seduced by a value on material things would be being corrupted by the world. Yeah. Right. So.
Well, very good, James. I enjoyed this. I hope you all did.
Yeah. So I'm excited to see you're going to start us on chapter 2 tomorrow. And
Tuesday.
Or Tuesday, excuse
me. Tuesday, on Tuesday. On Sunday, we'll have Pentecost, and we'll be doing a worship service together. James, thanks so much. And I do want to continue to thank the congregation for their generosity and their offerings to keep the ministry of this church alive and going during this time of shutdown. We'll see you. Yeah. You want to give a benediction or just say goodbye?
Live long and prosper.
Okay. Bye-bye.
And also with you.
And also with you.